Welcome to Leadership and People. This is a series that pulls back the curtain on leadership by interviewing CEOs, senior executives, and entrepreneurs who have had large exits. We ask these experts about how they built trusted networks to rapidly grow their companies and what advice they wish they knew if they could do it all again. Today on the show, we've got Marshall Paepke.
I think that probably the thing that I've learned is that we all think and we all see the world differently. So don't assume that how I or you see the world is how others see the world.
Thanks for making time.
Thank you.
So how big is the organization asset-wise now?
So we're just over 7.6 billion in assets.
Yeah.
We're doing business in 5 states, and we have about 2,200 employees in our branches and in our corporate offices.
Yeah. So imagine you've seen a few things, because I understand it. 21 years ago, you started as an intern. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Interested for folks who maybe started at the bottom in their organization, and maybe somebody's a leader listening to this, and they've got the new intern who's saying, you know, they're a C-level position. And they've got an intern saying, "How do I get your job?" And they're looking at a kid and saying, "Well, that's a long road," you know. But having made that road, what kind of advice would you have if you had to counsel some intern who wanted a C-level position eventually?
Well, I think one of the number one things is to be driven for what you're passionate about and what you believe in. So as an intern, I believe that you can make an impact on a company just like anyone else, whether it be in a C-level position or whether it be in a management or non-management position. So believe in yourself. If you're going to try and make an impact, make sure and do your homework. Make sure any proposal or recommendation that you're putting forward, has substance to it. So you're not just throwing out ideas without any facts or without any real data or information or plan behind it. But I think believe and hard work. I mean, some people want to have what others have taken years or a lifetime to earn, but are you willing to put in the hard work and the diligence to obtain what you want?
So if I'm a C-level leader and I've got to give that message to an intern where, I don't want to just discourage him.
Yeah.
I want to give them the hope, be realistic, that balance beam between being realistic, but giving them the hope. Other people have done this. If you want it bad enough, you can get it too. Any advice of somebody like me who's got to advise an intern? How do I get my head on straight of being realistic with the kid, but also helping them, come to that conclusion that it's hard work, but it's doable work or something?
No, I think it's a good and fair question. I would say this is that we don't know what other people are capable of. And so be careful in narrowing or funneling too small what they can or could achieve, but really giving people the freedom to go out and explore and become and to make the difference however they see fit. And I'll tell you a little story real quick, if that's okay. So I began as an intern, and I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, I have this idea." And she's like, "Yeah, go for it." So I put all this time and energy into it, and I came back to her and I said, "It's not going to work." And she said, "Oh yeah, we already knew that." And I said, well, why did you let me go through all the work? And she said, "Well, I believed if there was anyone that could have solved the problem, it was you. And so I didn't want to get in your way of really solving a problem, finding the solution if there was one available." And that taught me a really important lesson. And I think it's addressing your question. Sometimes we already know an answer, but sometimes at the appropriate time, it's important to not get in the way of somebody else trying to find a solution that we haven't been able to find. And I think interns or new employees or people in new positions have that opportunity to see something different than we've seen it for a long time. And they can sometimes break through and find a solution that we're oblivious to because we've been in that role too long, or we've decided to see things a certain way. So bring in some new ideas, some new insight, people who are thinking out of the box that we're stuck in maybe. So the balance of trying to encourage without discouraging, I think it's a good question, but I guess what I would say to that is you've got to read the individual. There are some people who have pipe dreams, and it's okay to say, "Hey, you know what? Is that realistic?" and put it back on them to really reflect on it. But there's other people who are underselling themselves. And so we don't want to, again, build a story that gets in their way of achieving the success they're capable of. So how you do that, I think it's the individual. I've been able to coach and mentor a lot of different people. Each one has been mentored or coached differently because of what that individual needs. So I just say, know the individual that you're coaching, the intern, know what they're passionate about, ask them questions. Don't try and give them all the information. Help them go through that discovery process. And maybe through that discovery process, they'll realize, hey, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. Maybe I'm not willing to put the work in. Or maybe they'll say, this is going to be a lot of hard work. How can I do it better? And what can I learn from your mistakes or your successes so I can get there sooner? So just support them. Help them.
Yeah.
I think, so one last thing is, it's much like children. If your child came to you and said, Dad, I want to play in the NFL, would you say, you can't do that? Probably not. You'd probably say, okay, what do we need to do? How can I help you? What do you need to focus on if that's going to become a reality? We don't want to squash people's dreams. How do we help embrace their dreams?
Yeah. You know, as I understand it, with your role, you have completely different kind of coaching now, where you've got the chief marketing officer, head of HR that report to you.
Right, and a couple others, yep.
Yeah. What are the other?
So I have the role of corporate real estate. So all of our acquisition of land, as well as the buildings we build on
How many
them.
branches do you guys have about?
So 92,
Okay.
and we're building that 11-story building in Sandy right now, right by the Health Center Theater. And also R&D, so our research and development, our data warehouse, data analytics. So just some other roles and responsibilities
Plus
as well.
the individuals who's in charge of all the other 2,200 for HR
Yep.
and the marketing of it, right? Which
Yeah,
I hear financial services can be competitive. Is that?
very competitive, right?
So at this level, at where you're literally advising, C-level staff that report to you, what's something that maybe you've learned that maybe you wouldn't have discovered if you hadn't actually had the role yourself of helping C-level leaders reach their potential?
Probably
What's the non-obvious lesson?
That's a good question. I don't know if this is obvious or not, so you tell me. I think that probably the thing that I've learned is that we all think and we all see the world differently. So don't assume that how I or you see the world is how others see the world. So for me, seeing the future or a vision of what can happen or could happen is something that comes very easy to me. But what I've learned with working with some of the leaders I've had an opportunity to work with over the years, some people they're not visionary. So even though they're in a higher role in an organization, that's not a skill set that they have. So what are the individual skill sets that they have, and how to maximize their skill set, as opposed to assume that they have similar skill sets that I do? So that may not be an aha, but I think sometimes our filters and how we see the world, we become so used to those filters that we may not understand that other people aren't seeing the world as we see it.
So if I'm a senior leader and I want to reduce my filters, any advice of what I can be doing to get better at, pulling down the filters?
Yes. And again, I'm not going to say I'm good at this, but it's something I'm learning, is ask questions. In this interview, obviously I'm talking more, but I would say take the time to ask questions and really seek that understanding, because that understanding will help you understand other people's filters and how they're seeing the world. So if you throw out an opportunity or a problem and you say, hey, what do you think about this? Or how do you see this? Or what opportunities or solutions do you see? Instead of giving what you think are the opportunities or the solutions, then all of a sudden you'll start seeing the world through their eyes instead of your eyes.
This is a common theme when we talk to people. Why do you think it is that as leaders, we get so used to telling, or that we all know that we should do more of that deeply curious listening instead of just waiting for our turn to talk?
Active listening.
Yeah. Why do you think it's a struggle? Why do you think we have to keep talking about it? Why, if we know better, why don't we all do better?
Well, good question. Here's the conclusion I've come for myself. Two things really. One is we're time sensitive. And if we have the answer, then we just want to give the answer and we are ready to move on to the next thing. So somewhat we're impatient. So we need more patience. And with that patience can come learning. And without that learning of the other individual, we're going to be back in the same situation, giving the answer as opposed to supporting them finding the solution. And guess what? Most times they already have the solution, but because we're so eager to share our wisdom and knowledge, that we get in the way of them telling us, and then they own it even at a greater level and they're passionate about it than if we give our answer and they go execute our answer. So that's critical. So that's one. The second thing that I've got to remember now, but the second thing is, see, I'm getting old. You're not old yet. When you get old, your mind kind of, goes away.
We were just talking about the idea of letting them empty the cup first before we go filling it with any of our ideas.
Yeah. So the one we talked about, that's an important one. But this other one's really good if I can remember it. Let's keep talking. I'll remember it.
Yeah.
You can edit this.
If you remember it.
Okay.
We don't need to edit. Let's go for it. If you remember it, let's go back to it, though.
Okay.
Well, when you think about this idea of leading leaders,
Mm-hmm.
right? For someone who does have senior people under them who are obviously accomplished, otherwise they wouldn't be a chief marketing officer, a head of HR, in charge of real estate for 92 locations, building 11-story buildings, right? How do you balance the role of directing versus the role of helping them progress, like helping them become even better at their job? Or how do you think about those two issues? Do they relate in your mind?
They do. And I think it's similar to the last question is it comes down to what role should you be playing. And I think normally, so I'll share this answer, and this answers the last question as well, is oftentimes we really want to share our wisdom, but we also want to, we talked about how efficient and saving time. I'm telling you what, age stinks. but there's a process by which, we need to assess where they are in their learning and their experiences. Some people need a lot more guidance. Even though they may new to a role, they need more hand-holding. A new CEO isn't going to know everything they need to do, right? So the board of directors may spend more time with them, helping them understand. So if they're at that beginning stage, then we need to give them more time and energy and probably more guidance. But as we see we can trust them, and as we see they have greater experience, then we need to loosen up the reins, right? And give them the trust they deserve and allow them the opportunity to make mistakes and grow. So I think that that's really what we as leaders have to decide to do. So the book, you've heard the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. This is the answer to the last question, as well as this question is, I think that most people grow in a company because of their ability to execute and get things done. And if you're over a functional area like marketing or HR, that's really critical for you to have success and to be really closer to what's going on in the organization with your team. However, when you take on a role at a certain level of a company, you no longer have a functional role. So my role, I'm not in charge of any of these things that I'm over. I have leaders that are in charge of all of them. So then what's my role? My role is to support. And my role is to look at their vision, in support with them, in collaboration, and then look at the organization at large from a larger standpoint or a more broad standpoint or even a longer standpoint in the future, and try and decide where do we need to be or go. But if we're in the weeds with our different functional areas as opposed to an organizational view, that's what I think gets us back into giving more direction instead of giving more support. So that's going back to the last question. That I think is one of the fundamental mistakes we make is we tend to continue to do those things that helped us achieve the level of success we're at today. And then it hinders us from having the success we really could have if we're willing to let go of what got us here.
Yeah. Do you have any stories of, as you were coming up, as your career was growing, you were getting to higher leadership, of somebody that modeled this really well for you, or somebody that you feel like set the example for you?
That's a good question. Yes, I would say that one lady, her name was Lisa Tenney. She was over HR, and she was a senior VP, and I was over HR at large. I reported to her, but she was really good about talking directionally where we wanted to go, and she had great trust in me. And so once we talked about where we wanted to go, she had trust that I would get us there. And I appreciated that trust because it gave me the freedom, the latitude to go and pursue things to the degree that maybe we started going down the road left. And after a couple miles, we decided, oh, this isn't going to get us where we're going ultimately, so I need to go more right. Well, because of the trust, I didn't need to go back to Lisa and say, hey, we're going left and now we need to go to right. She knew that I was going to get us there in whatever time frame we set. So she really modeled that behavior of trust and of the willingness and ability to let me learn and go down that pathway without being there constantly as guardrails and saying, oh, you're too close to this side, you need to move over here. Because with those guardrails, sometimes we don't learn as quickly as we would otherwise if we really understand that we're driving the bus down that road and there's a sheer cliff. And if I go off that cliff, then it's all on me. And that's a whole different level of accountability, which I appreciated her allowing me to have and modeling the trust and the behavior to do that.
What do you feel like the benefit was for her? Like, did she get better work out of you? Like, what, besides just the personal satisfaction of helping, but what do you think's in it for her to have that trust and to maybe hold back, give you the space to make some mistakes or be creative? What do you think the benefit is to her?
Well, I think leaders like her, the benefit is they really are wanting succession planning and develop people so they're ready for the future. And so the projects that I was doing at that time wouldn't have put our company at risk, right? But they were still big enough for me at that point in my career that it felt very risky to me because of the size of projects they were. And so for her, I think there's a couple benefits. One is she gets to do what she does very well, which is develop people. Number two, it allows her to spend her time focused on the areas that she really needs to spend the time and energy, which are not the weeds. And three, I think she positions the organization for the future so that people are learning and developing those skill sets to take on greater roles in the future. So that's the value I think that's added back into her.
Yeah. Well, I know we're closing in on the end of this episode, and we'll tell everybody to come back for part 2 of the interview. But thinking about what we've covered so far, or something completely different, what do you feel like is one of the best pieces of advice you ever got, leadership-wise?
Best advice. Well, I think I've received this advice, but maybe this is my advice. Is I think as leaders, we don't understand the impact that our example has. I know we hear about that, but I want to share this specifically to work-life balance. Because as leaders, part of the reason why we are where we are is because we've worked hard and we've generally worked long hours, and we've sometimes neglected the things that are more important in life than work. And so I think the best advice that I could give, and I think I have received this over my career, is, at the end of the day, when your career is over, what are you going to remember? And generally, it's going to be the time that you didn't spend with those people that are the most important. And I think that's really important to model that behavior of work-life balance, because if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, then other people are going to feel they have to do the same thing. And your example will have an impact on families and people throughout your organization far more than you realize if you don't model the behavior of having a good work-life balance.
That's great. Well, let's end it there and invite everybody to come back for part 2 of the interview.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Logan Wilkes and I'm the CEO of Corporate Alliance. A few years ago, I moved to San Diego to build a new market for us there. The biggest deterrent I had to success was I didn't know a soul. I often thought to myself, if I just had a thriving network or influence, this would go 100 times faster. To be honest with you, I had never felt so alone in my life because A, I didn't have an influence, and B, I didn't know anyone that was going through the same thing that I was. If you have ever felt like this and you are looking to grow your influence, join us at one of our upcoming events. You can check us out at corporatealliance.net and request an invite to one of our upcoming experiences.